Hey, gorgeous! Welcome to the Business Mindset Podcast with Holly Wharton, which combines powerful strategies on how to upgrade your business mindset, along with practical business tips to grow your business. This podcast features solo shows with Holly and also interviews with inspiring women entrepreneurs from around the world. Thank you so much for joining us today. And now, here's your host, Holly Wharton.
Hello and welcome to the Business Mindset Podcast, episode 196. This is your host, Holly Wharton, and I'm here with today's special guest, Marianne Cantwell. Marianne is all about growing a life and business without compromising who you are. She's the author of a best-selling entrepreneurship book, the founder of Free Range Humans, and has since taken her 7 years' experience of running an online business to be a strategy mentor to business owners who aren't follow-the-leader types. I'm super excited to have you back on the show, Marianne, because you were one of my first guests in September 2013, episode number 7. So welcome back.
Oh, thanks, Holly.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and your business journey and what you've been doing the last few years since we last spoke and since you started your business, Free Range Humans.
Well, thanks for that, because it's funny, when we last spoke, I think I was probably in a phase where my book had probably just come out and I was super excited about all that. And what happened, just to backtrack a bit, when I first started my own business, having the whole quit your job, start your business thing, and created freedom and traveling the world with my business in a suitcase, as you do, at the time, that was a really different world of online business. It was very young at the time. So people who are newer to the scene now, you're probably inundated with all the options for a billion different masterminds and coaches and formulas. We know, if you go on Facebook now, that's what we see in the ads. But when I started out, even though it wasn't that long ago, only 7 or 8 years ago, it wasn't like that. What it was this beautiful creative space where it was about, you did things on your own terms because there weren't any other terms to find anyway. You could get guidance, but, it wasn't cool. It was a little bit, it was back in the days of yellow highlighter pen on web pages. It wasn't you could either be do things in a fun way or you could do things in a scammy way. There wasn't this other space. And so I was really lucky in that I got to experience what it was like to live in a business world that didn't have as many formulas going around. What happened, however, after my business took off, I had 20,000 readers, I had a sort of 6-figure business doing cool stuff, was that suddenly I'd started my work because I'm someone who, I think very much like you, Holly, I like to be able to do things not just on my terms, but actually as the person I am.
Yes.
That to me is the most, but yeah, you know what I mean? I think a lot of your podcasts are going to be on that wavelength. It's about being who you are, because I don't think we have a choice in that if we want to live a good life. That's where our best strengths lie. It's our best contributions lies, where our happiness lies. So that's what I wanted to do. And suddenly I found myself not only having a thriving business, but suddenly being prominent in a space that no longer represented who I was. And so I literally had a bit of an identity crisis because, I was like, hold up, did they just change the backdrop? That's how it felt like. I thought it was in this play and now I'm in that play. And that play is not one I would have chosen to be in. And so, it was all about the whole, I've got a 5-part formula that will get you 7-figure success and unicorns or something, was doing the rounds. And I was suddenly being associated with that, even though that's not what I was ever about. I know it's hard, right? And so I decided, all the people I was hanging out with at the time that were in this space were all really gunning for the next level, whatever that was to them at the time. And at one point I remember a conversation with someone that said, we've hit 6 figures in our business. I'm going to go for 7 figures this year. You're going to do it too. And I remember pausing. I know it was crazy. It's insane. I was in Bali and I remember pausing and I just said, hold up. I thought we got to take a break now. I thought we'd done it. And she's like, no, it's there. We should go and do it. And I remember at this point thinking, I thought it was insane before and now I definitely do. And so what happened was I took 3 months off my business around that time. I was like, okay, something's wrong. Put the brakes on. And yeah, I think the next year I took 3 months off, 100% offline. I didn't check in. I had my team running things. It took me a few months to set it up so it all flowed without me, thinking everything would break. And I was like, what will happen if I don't show up to my business for 3 months? What happened was that nothing broke. It went really well. And I had some time to think about my direction. And that was the start of a next phase in what I was doing, which was actually stepping a little bit away from that world quite consciously and asking myself, hold on, what we are having here is a specific way of seeing the world and a specific way of seeing success. but what is the bigger picture view? And so what I did at that point was I started making friends, this is a random one, with people who were in their 70s and their 80s. And who had, I know, this is my new hobby. I hang out with people in their 70s and 80s. My new best thing to do. But specifically people who'd had a success in their life, people who I admired, who'd maybe were like, led a field at a certain point. And I hung out with them and all of them were just like, yeah, just chill out. It'll be fine. Like, you don't need to worry so much. All the people who are pushing really hard and kind of going for the one shot, win everything at once, they're not going to be around in 10 years. But it's the long and the steady stuff. And that sort of mentorship that I've had, I think, by hanging out with those people has kind of shifted what I've been doing ever since. That's a very long answer to your question. But that kind of lot of thinking happened, basically.
I think that's an excellent answer to the question, because I think people who have just come to the business world, in the world of online business, it's so easy to give up because, you don't have that many costs. You've got your computer, you're probably working from home, that kind of thing. So it's so easy if the formula doesn't work for you or the blueprint or whatever, it's so easy to just go, oh, well, just give up and go back to, what I was doing before, which was a horrible corporate job or whatever. So I think it's easy for people to get to that stage where rather than pushing through and figuring out what is the next level for them or the next evolution of their business or whatever, you're just going, oh, well, just, kind of give up. So I think you're right. A lot of people don't stick it out.
And I actually think there's just a little rider to that. I think the bigger point is we have most of the messaging online these days, I assume everyone listening is familiar with that stuff, is actually aimed, and something that started to realizing, it's aimed at people who are not having success. And it speaks to you like you are a little bit of a loser. Yeah. That's honestly the spur. And I was sitting there going, what about people who have had success or who are used to having successes and maybe something's not working now, but what if things are going well on the outside? And what I'd realized at that point was we talk a lot about leaving a job, but what is happening at the moment in a very formulaic online world is that people are recreating jobs for themselves, but those jobs just look good.
Yes.
And, you poke the surface and they're not always that great. But, that's what's happening. And I think this is why I'm actually coming out and talking about it a lot more now, because I just don't think it's talked about, that freedom doesn't come from following a formula. Formulas are great. Like, I'm a fan of using formulas for when there's a specific thing that you need. So if you know that, I don't know, you are going to sell your coaching things through personal conversations, it's probably really useful to learn a few different ways to have better conversations. They're really useful. But when it comes to the meta formulas for how should a business look, what does success look like, what's the 5-step formula for success, what's the blueprint, that's not the way freedom lies. Because number one, that's contingent on you having the same personality as the person who created it, having the same life circumstances. And there's a lot, if we're not playing with it, then we get really stuck. But number two, even if it does work for you because you are really similar to them or something like that, then it's like being back in a job, because it cages you into doing things in one specific way. And it really limits your options and also your identity around who are you allowed to be. And so it kind of, that's, I guess, the rider on it is that, it's really, we often talk about this thing stops us having success, but actually I really want to redefine what does it actually mean to have success. Because what surprised me since, Holly, is I changed up a lot of my business as a result of this stuff.
So how did things change for you? Loads
and loads of ways. For one thing, I had been running for 5 years. I'd been running something called the Friday Love Letter, which was my weekly email. I used to write these, I'm sure you're on the list, epic emails, very personal, sent to my list. Very occasionally they'd be sent publicly, like blogged, but usually they were through my email list. I shut that down, which was a pretty big move. And that wasn't immediate. That was like a few years later after that happened. That was everything had led to that. Thinking that's ridiculous because that was my main marketing channel, right? Like, you don't shut down your main marketing channel. And I managed to do no marketing for like a year as well. But what happened was that firstly, because I'd been doing the work I'd been doing for a while, which obviously is important. You can't just shut down your main marketing channel from day one. But, I'd been doing it for a while. Instead of things closing down, I found things started to actually open up. I was like, I'm not doing anything anymore. And what happened was I started noticing the conversations and opportunities around me. So I'd been working with people who were really at a beginner kind of level for a really long time. But actually, the reason I got recommendations was for years I'd been sort of secretly, quietly mentoring essentially people, my colleagues who had established businesses. I was the one they'd call if something was going on with their marketing. That was the one they'd call if they're like, I'm feeling like I'm a bit blocked. And I was always like just doing it because it's what I did. And of course, then they'd recommend me to their clients. And then I was like, hold up, why have I never allowed myself to charge for that? Like, why have I never? And I didn't, because I was stuck in the mindset that I had a particular business and a brand that looked a certain way. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a big lesson for all of us, is that when I was so convinced that if I took one step out of that, then I wouldn't have a business, that I wouldn't have a brand, that I'd be, everything would collapse, which is ridiculous when you think about it. But I was so convinced of it. And I could have told you, in detail why there was definitely no possibility. So what I did at that point was I thought, okay, I need to prove to myself that this isn't the only way I can make an income. I'm really good at launching online courses. I can do that really easily. I know how to fill an online course. It's second nature now. But what if my reputation disappeared overnight? What if the internet no longer existed? What would I do to make money? And this is something I do often in my life. It's where I take something that is a fear that's stopping me doing something different, and I confront that by proving to myself that fear doesn't have to exist, or by taking it to the extreme. So it's a bit of a life hack that I've taken on many times. And this one, I was like, okay, so if my fear is actually about that, which is what it really was, I had all these excuses boiled down to it. I had a thing, but what else can I do aside from what I do? And I was like, fine, prove it to yourself. So what I did was I decided, right, I can't use my email list and I can't use my following for this because that would be cheating. How could I make money from scratch with no resources and no reputation, and I can't launch any courses or do anything like that? So I thought, well, while I was spending lots of time in Bali, I really got into going to spas a lot. I used to get all these body treatments. And when I got back to London, I'd make my own body scrub out of these recycled coffee grounds from my local cafe, coconut oil and a few other secret ingredients. And I was like, right, I guess that's what I do, because these are ingredients you can have in your kitchen. They're low cost. And so I put them together in these beautiful jars. Did some really basic branding. I basically went to a stamp place and get them to make a stamp for me with a brand on it, and went to a local market and set up a stall. This is totally, I hardly talk about this. This is a secret project.
Wow.
Like, yeah, what would you do if you had to make money? And I only told my friends about it, and a whole bunch of them, came along, and we were the best-selling stall that day. I know, it's crazy, right?
How long ago was this?
This was I should look through my photos. I've got it somewhere. This would have been not that long ago, actually, 2 years ago.
Oh, wow.
I know. And it was super fun. I was like, I was so glad I did it without cheating, because I was going to email my whole list. And I was like, don't tell people. Just go anonymously. Don't use anything you've done before. And it was so cool. I've got to say, I had this table out, beautiful white tablecloth, fairy lights, and only one product in 3 sizes. And I was price testing all day. So I was switching out prices. Wow. I was using all the marketing stuff we do online, but with real people and a real product. And I've got to say, I had such a good time. I walked away from that going, and then people were like, oh, are you good? People were even signing up to an email list for it because they loved the product. So they were testing it there and then. And like, oh, are you going to make this bigger? And I said, I could. Like, it was a great product and I could see how to scale it. But I was like, it's not actually what I really want to do. The point of it was I wanted to prove to myself that if push came to shove, there was something else I could start.
And something that's wildly different from everything that you had done before.
But actually something that takes, and I think it's a really cool thing to look at, is it took the same skill sets. Yeah. I know it sounds a bit weird. Like for me, if I know to launch something new, I know what my strengths are. My strengths are in how something comes across. My strengths are not in creating lots of things. They're in creating one thing and doing it well. So that was in there. And they're creating a beautiful experience. And so I took those 3 principles and applied that to this. And that's all it took. So yeah, that was like an example of one of the things I did that led to some major changes in how I run my business. But I think it's something that we can all use as a tool. When there's this thing that we're like, wait a second, but it's impossible for me. And I was saying it is impossible for me to consider doing anything else because I've gone too far. I'm too established in what I do. Why would I throw anything away? And also there's no option, is to actually really interrogate that, not by sitting and telling yourself it's wrong, but by proving to yourself. Because that if you're as stubborn as I am, and I'm pretty stubborn, that's literally the only thing you will listen to is hard evidence. So hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. And so coming out of the body scrub coffee episode,
which is great.
Yeah, which sounds amazing. How did you then step aside and start what you're doing today, which is more of the higher level business mentoring, from what I understand?
Yeah. Well, this was really interesting. So I talked the talk, right? Like I did all this stuff and I was like, I'm so going to go. But the problem was I had this amazing membership I was running. And the reason it was amazing is A, it was beautiful people. B, it was great content. That was my gathering of content from 5 years of work that was in there. And C, it meant that I had to show up once every 3 months for like a really good income. Like it was the dream membership. And I realized, and it was holding me back. And this was killing me because I was looking at going, no, we're not shutting down the membership. That's stupid. People work very hard to have this, and now it's here. Let me outsource bits. So I'd outsource them, and it was still there. And when I realized it was a real energetic drag on me, even though it wasn't time. And I think sometimes we can miss it, and we think, oh, but it doesn't take my time. It doesn't have to take your time. It can take your energy. And that's what I realized. I had this beautiful product, but it was taking my energy away, because every time I thought I should go and do X, Y, Z, or I could go and do this other thing with my life, I'd think, yes, but what about that? And there's a sense that I wasn't creating and saying the things I really wanted to say, because in the back of my mind, I was afraid of losing the income from that membership. And that's a really hard thing to say in some ways, because, we're all like, oh, I speak my truth. And I'm like, I do speak my truth, but there are lots of versions of your truth.
Yes.
And there is no way that your paying product has no impact on that. There's no way. Not how we are as humans. We're, especially with, I have a strong survival instinct, as a lot of entrepreneurs do. And of course it impacts. And so actually towards the mid last year, I made the choice to shut down my membership, which is insane on the outside. And my members were wonderful. They got it. They really got it. They were so supportive. I ran one last business program, and without any fanfare, like I haven't announced any of this to my list. It's just whoever comes across me, I'll tell them. Pulled down all my membership. I pulled down all my business programs. The only program available on Free Range Humans is the 21-day course, which is working out what you want to do with your life when you're not sure what you want to do and you like everything. That's been up for years, and I'm like, that can stay. But the business only stuff, once you've worked it out, is all gone for now. And actually possibly forever, actually. I decided to step out of that world because it wasn't, I can't describe it. It wasn't right for me, even though it is one of my zones of genius. It wasn't right. So I shut that down and promptly had a bit of a meltdown because, like most entrepreneurs, I'm the sole breadwinner. I have a mortgage. I'm single. I don't have a backup plan. I have savings because I've run my business responsibly for many years. And last year also, what happened last year was I bought my own place in London purely with the income from my business. Like that's how I bought it. Like it was from savings over the years. I had a deposit saved. I had, enough for a mortgage. And so I secured myself a mortgage, which was interesting when you're self-employed, but managed that. And now I have my own little place in London, which is great. But now I have a mortgage, but I made sure it wasn't particularly high so that I could actually make these changes. So I found myself in this situation and I was like, oh my gosh, this feels like exactly how I felt at the beginning of my business, but with one big difference, which is now I can make things happen because I understand what it takes to make something happen. I understand, I know people now, and I didn't before. And I was like, okay, it's like the beginning of your business again, but it's almost like you get a little bit of a head start in making it work. What has happened since then has been the mentorships I put up, which I have never really ever advertised, to be honest. I didn't even have a website on this until I think a month ago. Yeah. People through word of mouth, old colleagues, old collaborators, people who have businesses started either buying them or recommending it to people. So that started going. I was like, okay, that's nice. I haven't promoted this at all. A TED Talk opportunity came up, which I turned down 2 TED Talks before. I just didn't want to do. Yeah, I kept getting asked, and I was like, I don't want to talk about it, which is probably a sign you're running the wrong business. Yeah. And I was like, okay, fine. I did that last week, and the video is coming out soon. And if that does well, then that will be a whole other adventure. And all these collaboration opportunities have come up as well. And so since shutting it down, yes, it's really scary having done that. I've gone through so many different iterations in what I do, but I also can see that what I did, and I said this towards the end of my TED Talk, when I look at the people in the world who have the biggest success and really have the biggest flow in what they do in a world level, they have always let go of something that they thought was possible to let go of. There is no way around this because we're creatures of habit. Yep. And cutting the cord sometimes is necessary. However, I'm not someone who would cut the cord without having put stuff in place. So for me, getting a place where I could pay a mortgage that wasn't, several thousand a month meant that I could take some risks, short-term risks. Not that risky because I do have some savings, but risky in terms of, for someone as risk averse as me, they were pretty risky. But the biggest thing that's come out of it was the realization that actually a lot of the issue I had with my original business was because when you're your own brand, your identity gets conflated with your business, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with it. Now I look back at Free Range Humans, which is still there and still has content available, and realize that maybe in 6 months or a year, I'll go back to it, but treat it like a business, not like a personal brand. Really automate the heck out of it, which it hasn't been. Right, it has been, but it could be done I'm so clear how it could be done better. Really up level it, but treat it like a business. And I think that's something we don't talk about a lot, is when you're just like yours is, and everyone's is online these days, your brand is conflated with your business. There is actually a personal pull towards being more and more of the person that you're kind of meant to be. And for me, it actually took really breaking it, because I was so in flow in what I did that it was like the boat was moving really fast and I had to literally sort of like push it to the shore to be able to get off and take a look at it. And I was like, oh, the boat's actually all right, but I'm not that person anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a very sort of long story version, but I think it's really important because there's no, I see this a lot in the online world, like behind the scenes. We talk about getting to a certain place, but I don't really think that is a true thing, because what's more important is the feeling that we have while we're there. And, this isn't to say don't grow your business. I think if you're here and you're in business, you should keep doing what you're doing. Like, that's great. Or like switching it up so that it's something that you love, but whatever it is. But it's to me, all the story that I've just told is actually about awareness.
Yes.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would be your tips for someone who's maybe not feeling quite right in their business anymore, but they're at their place where they're not quite sure what to do? What would you recommend?
I think I would sit down, take some time away from where you normally work and hang out. I actually went to a park to do this, and really take a look at, firstly, what it is that you're feeling about what you do, and notice anywhere you're saying should. So the should could look like, oh, I should like this because of these reasons. Or could. Oh, yeah, but that could work if. And also the second thing I'd say is look for a sense of tightness, like physical tightness. Just notice it and note at every point. And the third thing is, while you're noticing this and you're saying what's going on with my business, or here, okay, I'm feeling really tight when I say this, I'm saying should and could here. Where are you saying the word impossible? It is impossible for someone like me to. That is going to be your gateway to stuckness or freedom. That's your gateway to stuckness or freedom, without a doubt. I can't count the number of people I know who have successful online businesses who I've spoken to in private about this, what I've talked to you about here, who have said to me, but it's impossible for someone like me to X, Y, Z. And I tell them the story and they'd be like, oh, but people like us don't do that. Like, I have had 3 people, no joke, with very prominent online brands saying that to me. And I was like, well, if that's what freedom looks like, that's not something I want to sign up for. Yeah. Because if suddenly we turn into that, this is not what people like us do. I'm like, what is this? And so that, just look at it really carefully and just ask yourself, because you don't need to, these changes I made didn't come overnight. They came over a period of years. Yeah. And you get to choose. Like, even if you open a gateway, it doesn't mean you have to step through it fully. You might say, you know what, I could see a big change over there. It's just way too big for me to contemplate now. So what I'm going to do is take a little step towards it. And I actually am a big believer in taking these little steps. So for me, my first step towards the changes I was making was slowing down my Friday love letter, doing it less than once a week. Then it was stopping it. Then it was, making another change. And it was only like several years later, and I was like, no, I'm really ready. Like, I've really got myself in a position where I can make a change now. Then do it. But what I would say you don't do is sit there and say, I've created a sort of a box for myself. And also, I would also suggest that you don't look at what you think you're allowed to do or have a sense of, oh God, what will people think of me? Because what I've discovered is people don't think about you very much.
No, they probably don't.
And it's really going to be fine in the end. So yeah, that's what I've got. It's like, I hope this is helpful, because it's I'm really grateful, and I hope this probably hasn't come across, for everything that's worked in what I've done, and I've had a really great time doing it, and I still am having a great time. It's just that when we talk a lot about up-leveling what we do and stepping into our next big thing. And sometimes I think we actually, instead of looking up, we need to look deep.
Yes.
And that's maybe your next step. For some people listening, by the way, this won't be appropriate. For some, there are different stages where in different seasons we're all in. And maybe your next big step is up. Maybe that you do need to be expanding. But I would say that a lot of people who are listening, maybe your next big step is deeper, not higher. And if we don't have our roots in the ground, almost like you want a tree to grow tall, its roots have to be in the ground. And what's that to me, what I've just talked about, was that I needed to reroot before I could go high and feel stable doing so. And that's where I'm feeling now. I'm feeling like really rooted in and ready to kind of move up again.
And I think sometimes the easiest way to move up is to go deep, first of all.
I agree. Sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? But actually, exactly right. I agree with you.
It just helps you get back into the core of yourself and who you are and what the heck you're doing this for and what you're meant to be doing and what you want to be doing. And then from there, you can move up more quickly and easily, I think, than if you were just pushing, hustling.
Yes, I absolutely agree with that.
So, Marianne, are there any other online business people that you see doing exciting things that you kind of like to connect with or follow, or that you've learned things from on this journey?
No, I don't mean that in a bad way. The reason I say no very clearly is I basically unfollowed everyone very consciously. And there's a reason for that. Not because I think the work's bad at all. That's not what I wanted to come across as for one bit. I think there are people who are doing some really great stuff, and I would name them, but they're more specific to me, if that makes sense. Like I happen to be attracted to someone because they're doing something on Instagram that I'm not interested in. So it's not because I think that everyone needs it. The reason I say no was I realized that one of the most powerful things that you can do is to get input from varied sources, and that my sources were too narrow. So what I've done, actually what I talk about in my TED Talk as well, is I read really widely. I read a lot of books, but I read them on different topics. I read deeply on psychology, on economics, on political theory, I read anthropology, a lot of literature, and all of that actually informs, through its themes and patterns, informs the work that I do. And so it's something I talk about. It's a thing I want to talk about a lot more, is the idea of actually, if we move within a silo and that's our only input, we close off to what other possibilities are out there. And the greatest innovation in the world comes from taking an idea from one other sphere and putting it into yours. So that for that reason, a few months back, I really closed down a lot of influencers and now let people in selectively. As in, if I want something on Instagram, I'll pick like the person who's doing that thing. If I want something on something else, I'll pick that person and I bring them back in one by one. So I'd say, if you look at my bookshelf, that would be a great example. But if you want people who inspire me at the moment, I think Elizabeth Gilbert, the work she's doing is incredibly inspiring. What else am I reading? But that sort of person, I think, that has made some big changes in their life and is really rooted in their own truth, but doesn't kind of let being a thinking and reflective person stop them from moving forward. They're the people I think that we want to surround ourselves by when we need to make those sort of changes.
Excellent. So where can our listeners find you online?
They can go to mariannecantwell.com, which is where I'm hanging out at the moment. Hit me up at Free Range Marianne on Instagram or Free Range Humans on Twitter.
Ooh, excellent. And what's your favorite social network right now?
Oh my God, all of them. I would say a combination of Facebook has always been my little home. So Marianne Cantwell on Facebook as well, which is a new page I've set up. So it's quite little at the moment. But I'm actually having a lot of fun on Instagram. Loads of fun. I'm not hugely active, as in I don't post every day, but it's a really relaxing hangout. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I love Instagram. And I don't use it so much for kind of the business marketing side of things and promoting my stuff. It's more like I go on a walk, I take pictures of my walk, I take pictures of my cats. It's kind of like the personal side of me.
That's exactly how I feel about Instagram. So I love all three. They're my three social networks. I use them for different purposes.
Yes.
So whatever your favorite is, come say hello on one of those.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and telling us kind of your updates since the last time we spoke.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure being here again.
Thank you. And thank you for listening. And remember to visit hollywharton.com/196 for the show notes on this episode. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to the Business Mindset Podcast with your host, Holly Wharton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed at hollywharton.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please remember to head over to iTunes and leave a quick review of this podcast. It just takes a minute. Thank you.